Today's story, The Treasure of the Custodians, from Wisdom of the Idiots by Idris Shah. The Treasure of the Custodians. A prince of the illustrious house of Abbas, kinsfolk of the Prophet's uncle, was living a humble life in Mosul of Iraq. His family had fallen upon evil times and had reverted to the common lot of man to labor. After 3 generations, the family was somewhat restored, and the prince had the status of a small shopkeeper. As is the custom with the noble among the Arabs, this man, whose name was Daud el-Abbasi, merely called himself Daud, son of Altaf. He spent his days in the marketplace, selling beans and herbs, trying to repair the family's fortunes. This process continued for some years, until Daud fell in love with the daughter of a rich merchant, Zobeide ibnat Tawil. She was more than willing to marry him, but there was a custom in her family that any prospective son-in-law would have to match a rare gem, specially selected by the father, in order to prove his resourcefulness and also his material worth. After the preliminary negotiations, when Daud was shown the glittering ruby which Tawil had chosen for the test to win his daughter, the young shopkeeper's heart became heavy. Not only was this gem of the finest water, but its size and color were such that the mines of Baraksan could surely have never yielded anything of that kind more than once in 1,000 years. Time passed, and Daud thought of every means he could to find the money which he would need even to try to match the jewel. He at length discovered from a jeweler that he had but one chance. If he sent out criers to offer anyone producing its equal not only his house and all his possessions, but also 3/4 of every penny which he would earn for the rest of his natural life, there might be a chance to find a similar ruby. Accordingly, Daud caused this announcement to be made. Day after day the word went forth that a ruby of astonishing value, brilliance, and color was being sought, and people from far and near hastened to the house of the merchant to see whether they could provide anything so magnificent. But after a lapse of almost 3 years, Daud found that there was no ruby in Arabistan or Ajam, in Khorasan or Hind, in Africa or the West, in Java or Ceylon, which came anything near the excellence of the one which his prospective father-in-law had found. Zobeide and Daud were at the point of despair. It seemed as though they were never to marry, for the girl's father refused adamantly to accept anything less than a perfect match for his ruby. One evening, when Daud was sitting in his small garden, trying to think for the 1,000th time of some means to win Zobeide, he realized that a tall and emaciated figure was standing beside him. In his hand he had a staff. On his head was a dervish cap. Slung at his waist was a metal begging bowl. "Peace upon you, O my king," said Daud in the customary salutation, rising to his feet. "Daud the Abbasi, scion of the house of Quraysh," said the apparition. "I am one of the guardians of the treasure of the apostle, and I have come to help you in your extremity. You seek a matchless ruby. I shall give it to you, from the treasures of your patrimony, left safe in the hands of the penniless custodians." Daud looked at him and said, "All the treasures which was in possession of our house was spent, sold, plundered centuries ago. We have nothing left but our name, and we not even use that for fear of dishonoring it. How can there be any treasure left out of my patrimony?" "There could still be treasure, precisely because it was not left in the hands of the house," said the dervish. "For people always first rob those who are known to have something to steal. When, however, that is gone, thieves do not know where to look. This is the first measure of security of the custodians." Daud reflected that many dervishes are reputed to be eccentrics, and so he only said, "Who would leave priceless treasures such as a gem like Tawil's in the hand of a ragged beggar? And what tattered beggar, having been given even one such thing, would forbear from throwing it away or selling it and spending the proceeds in an insane bout of recklessness? The dervish answered, "My son, this is exactly what people are expected to think. Because beggars are ragged, people imagine that they desire clothes. Because a man has a jewel, people imagine he will throw it away, even if he is not a thrifty merchant. Your thoughts are the things which help to make our treasures safe." "Then take me to the treasure," said Dowd, "so that I may end my intolerable doubts and fears." The dervish blindfolded Dowd and made him ride dressed as a blind man for several days and nights on a mean donkey. They dismounted and walked through a mountain cleft, and when the cloth was removed from his eyes, Dowd saw that he was standing in a treasure house where incalculable quantities and unbelievable varieties of precious stones glittered from shelves in the serried walls of stone. "Can this be the treasure of my forefathers? Because I have never so much as heard of anything like it, even from the time of Harun el-Rashid," said Dowd. "You may be sure that it is," said the dervish. "And more than that, this is only the cavern which contains the jewel from which you may choose. There is much more." "And it is mine?" "It is yours." "Then I will take it all," said Dowd, who was almost overcome by greed at the sight. "You will take just what you have come here to take," said the dervish, "for you are as little fitted for the proper administration of this wealth as were your forebears. If this were not so, the custodians would have handed back the entire treasure centuries ago." Dowd chose the only ruby which exactly matched to Will's. And the dervish bore him back to his house in the same way as he had brought him. Dowd and Zobeida were married. And in this way, it is related, the treasures of the house are handed out to their proper inheritors whenever they have real need for them. Today, the custodians are not always patched dervishes in appearance. Sometimes they are, to all outward appearances, the most ordinary of men. But they will not yield the treasures, except when there is a real need.